All right, I think this is working now. I had some trouble with the streaming software that I had, so we'll give everyone a couple minutes to jump in here, and that might have been on the other stream. Sorry about that. So, but while we're waiting, I thought I'd let everyone know that the idea behind this is to maybe start doing a live stream, once a month or something like that, to answer some of the questions that people have. I get a lot of comments on my videos, and I try to respond to all of them. Sometimes YouTube is great and works just fine, and I can respond. Other times, it seems to not allow me to comment on anything, and it can take a couple days for me to get back after I try it a couple times. So I thought this might be a chance to just have everyone on here and see what people have to say. Let me see if I can bring up the participant list here. I see I've got one person on here, Ahmed. Welcome. So, as I said, just trying to see what's gonna happen with this and see how many people join, and go over some of the questions. So I thought first off I'd just go over some of the questions I've had recently, especially about my bins and how dry they are or they're too moist. So what I want to talk about is, I run my bins in a way that they're typically more moist. I know that's not the most popular thing to do. I happen to like doing it because I think the worms are a little bigger. They're easier to find. Oh, wow. From Turkey and Istanbul. I love that. I love having an international audience here. I like the fact that there are people in other countries that are looking to do this and to help the world really by getting rid of their own food scraps or raising worms to replenish the soils we have. So I'm really happy to see that we've got some people from other countries. I'm doing well. I'm healthy. I'm well. I've been like a lot of people I know. I've been stuck in my house a lot. That's why my hair is really long here, and normally it's never this long. And grown my beard out a little bit more than usual. So, just trying to do what I can really to stay sane by talking to people online, make lots of phone calls during the day with people, and still working from home. Thankfully, I'm very lucky to still be employed fully. So things for me are going really well. I can't really complain. I know that others are having hard times, and I've donated some funds, and I've also tried to maintain hi Barry from the UK. As I was saying, I'm trying to maintain sort of this, the local businesses. I've been trying to spend money there as much as I can by ordering in food or picking up food to support these local businesses. And I hope other people that are in the same situation are doing the same thing. So how's everyone else doing? Please, I know that there is a delay. I did some testing with this before, and I think there's like between a 5 to 7 second delay between me talking and actually it going out to the world. So if you see that delay, just this is the first time I'm really trying streaming out. So we'll see how this goes. And of course, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments here. I'll be more than happy to answer the best of my abilities, as long as I have an answer. If it's something about my bins, it's a little easier to answer than if it's something about maybe composting in general that I've never tried before. I know I've had a lot of questions lately since I started a bin with pine shavings that some people are like, oh, can I add this to it, or rabbit poop, or hamster droppings and stuff. Everything I'm reading says yes, but I have not tried it myself, so I can't fully confirm that. So we'll go from there. Yeah, Barry, it's the first time for me as well that I'm trying this. I've been on a couple other live sessions, but typically they're when I'm working, so I'm not able to. They'll have it on a Monday at 3 p.m. and it's like I can't just leave work or log off from work. I need to make sure I keep my job, and so I typically don't get a chance to log in, or I don't have time because I'm making dinner or something like that. So that's why I'm trying this for me it's 11 a.m. on a Saturday. I figure for the United Kingdom and further out as you go to Turkey or India, I figure it's later during the day there. So maybe it's at night where they can jump on. The East Coast is kind of early in the morning, that 3-hour time shift to them, but for the U.S., I should say East Coast of U.S., but I figured they can also get on if they wanted to. That's why I figured this might be a kind of a good time. And doing it on a weekend allows more people to be involved. Okay, Barry, great question. So I run several different types of systems. You are correct. And I typically, it really depends what I'm doing. Like if I want to, like my 10 gallons are still one of my favorites. They really are. They're just so easy to run. They're a little bit hard to clean, but at the same time, they just work really well, and I can move them around. I really do like the bag systems for a continuous feed system. They just work so well. It's so easy to harvest out of the bottom. If you were trying to raise worms, they probably don't work all that well. If you're trying to get castings, they are phenomenal. So I really do like my bag systems actually, and they've become my go-to systems. Anytime I have too much food, I throw them in a bag system. These continuous flow-through systems where you've got the funnel at the top and they just harvest from the bottom. They really do work well. I know that I think there's one that's was it the Hungry Harvest bin? I think that's plastic. I've never tried that. They're sort of expensive to me, at a couple $100, I think, or I think they were 200 or something. And also for shipping, I think they're from Australia. So I've never really tried them. I've heard good things about them though. So let's just see who else has joined here. So Food Forest Permaculture, hello. And yes, fellow Earthlings, much hugs to you too as well. And then let's see, I see Theo is on. And in the same time zone, so on the East Coast here. So it really works well. So, thank you everyone for joining. We'll see if anyone jumps on. As I said, I might try to make this a weekly or monthly event, depending on how many people join and how many questions we have. So, but this is new to me. I'm used to recording, taking my time, taking big breaths of air, relaxing, saying a few things, and then recording and then editing later to cut out some of the stuff. So we'll see how this goes. But I figure it's a way to really kind of, bring everyone together that has questions without me trying to, answer something and then somebody asks the same question later. So from Southern Vancouver, I like that. So how are things there? Is it cold there in Vancouver right now? Is it snowing there, or is it nicer weather? Here it's about 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. So right at that freezing level. And to me, it's nice. I love this type of weather. I dress in these nice warm, and this is actually like a Sherpa lined shirt, and, stay nice and warm and toasty. And I love this type of cold weather. I know other people that, including my wife and kids, that tend to like it a little bit warmer. They'd rather be on the beach in the sun. But, for me, I like this colder weather. In fact, I go up north normally to go skiing a little bit, and spend some time out in the snow and where it's cold. So I'm glad to see some West Coasters being able to make it on, this early in the morning. And, I see it's Alabama, 35 in Alabama. Welcome aboard there, Jaw. So Alabama, 35. For some reason, I always think Alabama is being warmer, but I guess it does get cold down there. Does it? Probably snows there as well. Get some of that nice cool temperature coming in to shake things up a bit. Oh, so it's sunny and never see snow much. Oh, so that temperate marine climate in Vancouver. Okay, like Spain or Italy. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So sort of, I know that I have some relatives in the Seattle area, and it'd be sort of the same way, I would think. So with that temperature where it doesn't, you typically get that marine weather flowing in. So North Alabama does. Okay. So the Southern Alabama, I guess, doesn't get that, but I guess they still get the cooler temperatures maybe along the further south you go, but just not the snow. Okay. So I'm so happy to see I've got 7 people online here. Well, I think that includes me, so 6. But as I've said before, I just want to sort of go over some questions. We already had one question that I answered about, just trying to click in here, by Barry about my favorite system. And I think that for most people, the system to be would be a flow through. If you're not trying to raise worms for sale, I think it's just a great system to have this continuous flow of food going into a system. You can overload them, but it's hard to do. And if you start overloading them, the worm population is going to catch up. As long as you don't throw in, 10 gallons of food off the bat, you're not going to overload them, but they do take a lot more time, I feel, to get going. So that's my my opinion on that. I really like those flow through systems. So we get the cold air, but not the snow. Well, I know I like the snow. I like driving around in snow. I like the snowy weather. To me, I think it's a beautiful thing to see just a blanket of white outside, and then by the next day it looks horrible as all the trucks and cars are driven over it. But I do kind of like getting that snow. Although we've had one dusting here so far. I live in the Baltimore, Maryland area, so we get we can have up to 4 seasons in a single day, where it'll be 5 degrees outside and then all the way up to 70 the next day. And if including that day, I mean, you just never know what you're going to get here, it feels like. So we can be there's times where they've said, oh, we're going to get 2 feet of snow, and we get 60-degree weather, and there's times where they say we're going to get nothing, and we ended up getting 2 feet. So it just really, we're always on that line. There's a line, and it's like, well, we were either above it and we get something, or below it we get nothing. So it's sort of nice to get that snow, but it's also nice that it does disappear, so it's not always out there. Okay, so you guys grow lemon. I'm not sure what those are. Satsumas, loquitos, kiwi, and other subtropics in the microclimates. Wow, I didn't realize you could grow kiwis up that high. So that's a pretty amazing. I thought that they needed a warmer climate. So I like to hear that, and that's one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while, is to actually start having a garden here, and especially during the summer. Right now I've just been putting the compost out in my yard to try to get the grass growing, because this house is built on top of a golf course, and they stripped away all the topsoil, so it's essentially clay and rock. So I've been trying to build this soil, build these microbes back up. I don't use any fertilizers really. I don't use any of my let's see, what is it? Chemicals or pesticides or herbicides. Sorry, I'm getting some text here. So anyhow, so I've been trying to not use those things and build up the microbial levels in my soil, and the compost is supposed to help with that. So that's what I've been doing here. So you produce worm castings and have some questions. So you wrote your email. I'll reach out to you by email. I will hide that from everyone, but I will reach out to you by email. And I'll let you know, and you can write back to me, and we can go back and forth. I don't mind doing that at all. And of course, if anybody else wants to share, I'll be more than happy to share. I'm glad to see though that you're producing worm castings. These are great for crops. These are great for your yards. They're great for a lot of different things for growing. I mean, it's just the microbial levels in them are really good. You're getting that nice, healthy compost, and actually, it's better than compost in a lot of ways. In fact, there's a company here called Veteran Compost where I actually bought my worms from. They don't sell worms anymore, but I bought my worms there, and they sell compost, and then at a higher price level, they sell their castings. And I've seen their worm farm and everything. And I probably actually should go back and see if I can get a tour at some point, maybe post a video on it. But they had a massive building that they had these worms in to sell these castings, and they looked absolutely beautiful, these castings that they produced. So I'm glad to hear that this is being done in other countries, and to build our soil back up. So let's see. Food forest, a picture of the property when frost on the ground, and when no frost, then your microclimate. Enhance with a shield and a jug of hot water under the shield when dips below zero. That's a great way to protect your crops. You're right, to keep that shield up. I know we have actually some neighbors here in my area that grew a ton of lettuce. They grow crops in their yard every year, and they covered them up with clear plastic cloth or tarp of some sort, and they did do that to keep everything as the frost was rolling in, and then they harvested before the first snow came by. And that's and then you have a greenhouse as well. Yeah, that's amazing. I like to hear that greenhouses and things are being utilized to grow up in further climates, and as you keep the soil and everything, you can do that. The soil is our life source, really, when you look at it. I know I've been listening to a couple podcasts. One of them, How to Save a Planet, which I highly recommend. It's a Gimlet Media show, and it's about what you can do and what other companies can do to try to save the planet that we're living in. So they've talked to farmers with different growing techniques, and they've talked about how we've extracted all these minerals and carbons from the soil, and how we really need to enhance our soil by putting this back in. And it's actually a way to sequester carbon from the air. Who knows how much has been released, but we've essentially killed our soils by these companies convincing farmers that the way to do it is you plow up your soil, you dump pesticides, you dump herbicides, you dump all these things on the soil, and it keeps people buying this stuff, but it's really not great for the farmers. It's actually just slowly eroding their earnings. As they constantly have to buy more and more of these chemicals to replenish their soils, that still just gets washed away. So if we can move towards these more fundamental ways of agriculture and keeping our soil healthy, it'll really help out in the long run for our farmers, who are such an important part of our economy and our livelihood. I mean, farmers are the ones that really, all the food you have is from a farmer, essentially, unless you're growing it yourself. And those farmers are struggling, I feel. And I feel incredibly sorry about this and sorrowful towards them, the fact that they're struggling to make a living off of the land because of the way that they have been taught by agricultural businesses to tend to their lands. So, let's see here. You're good till -12. I'm guessing is that Celsius, I'm guessing. So -12 Celsius, which would be below freezing, obviously, and I guess around 10 degrees Fahrenheit or so. So, yep. Any thoughts on worms? Well, obviously, I do a lot of composting with worms. I still like my red wigglers the best. They multiply like crazy. They can. I've had them alive in various size containers, from as small as 2 gallons all the way up to my large 27-gallon bins. They tend to multiply quickly. They can survive in a variety of conditions, from hot to cold. My parents actually had a bin outside. It was a large bin. It was insulated, but the top was not insulated and the bottom was not insulated. And they were able to survive down to -6 degrees Fahrenheit. This would be probably -20 or something Celsius, I guess. I'm not sure exactly where it would be. Maybe colder, maybe -30. But it's amazing how they were able to survive. And actually, at one point, it froze solid. The bin they didn't put enough food in it to keep it warm, and it froze solid. And as soon as it thawed out, the worms came right back. I was shocked by this. I thought I'd have to help restock their bins. Their outdoor bin that they had. And this was a large unit. I mean, this was a 2-foot by 4-foot unit. But it's amazing that they were able to come back from that, being frozen, essentially solid. I mean, it was just a solid block of ice in there. And the cocoon's heart, just came right back, and it was loaded with worms the next year, and I never put any more in it. And they had it going for, I want to say 8 years, between 5 and 8 years before the bin deteriorated and they took it apart. So they can survive it. And they survived up to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty hot. I mean, that's, it was to the point that we had a possibility of brownouts here because of the fact that there's so many people running air conditioning to cool their houses down. So it's really just amazing the temperatures that they can survive. Now, I have been using European night crawlers. Now, if you are into fishing, these are the worms for you. They are massive compared to red worms. The red wigglers, they get like maybe 1 inch to maybe 2 inches if you're lucky. The European night crawlers will be as big as my hand almost. I mean, they'll be up to like 6 inches. And they are phenomenal worms. Now, I haven't used them fishing because typically I'm fishing for smaller stuff. But I know other people that have used them for bait and love them. And actually, I've been meaning to go out and go fishing with them in the Chesapeake Bay here. And I just haven't had the time. And my kids actually enjoy fishing. So I've been meaning to do that. And I have fishing poles ready to go. And those are the worms you want for fishing. So if you're looking to raise fishing worms, they are almost as good as red wigglers as far as I think they can consume as much. They're pretty quick at consuming, but they can take colder temperatures, but they can't take the heat as much. So it's sort of like, if the red wiggler temperatures from here to here, the European night crawlers are probably on that level that's right here to here. So they can't quite get up as high in temperature, but they work better at a lower temperature. So in my basement here at around 68 degrees, they work really well, especially during the summer. So I do like them, but I still prefer my reds. I think they just do a better job of going through the food. So let's see. So thank you for watching my channel, by the way, Food Forest, and thank you everyone that's watching this live feed. As I said, I'm trying this out, and we'll see. And you'll see me again. I'm glad to hear that. And yes, no problem. I'm always willing to answer questions. And in my videos, when you see me online and I post a video, I still will answer comments after the video. I try to go back and answer them. I don't always get to them, and sometimes I miss them, but I will try my best to go back and answer them. I enjoy answering questions. I enjoy people that also question what I'm doing to a point. I've had some people be a little bit more forceful of saying I should just stop doing this because I'm horrible. That's a little bit odd in my opinion to just tell somebody that, but there are people like that. But I love hearing comments. I love hearing suggestions. I've learned a lot of things actually from the comments I've had in my videos. So, as far as using, what is it? These, let me just grab right here. These mosquito bits. I've been hearing a lot about people that use these, but they say they soak them in water and then they dump the water over their worm bins to use them. Now, by the way, these are supposed to be, I don't know about this container, but these are actually organic according to the EPA here in the US. So that's where I'm trying these out again, actually in another bin. I'm really going to have a video soon to show whether these really work or not. So That's coming up in the future. So let's just see here. Is there anything not to put in a worm bin? Uh, Definitely, yes, there are. And it really depends on the size of your worm bin. So I have shown before, like in a lot of videos, they're going to say, don't put citrus in, don't put citrus in, don't put citrus in. I'm putting citrus in my worm bins. And I tried this out a few years ago. And I actually just posted a video about it, not an update, but reposted it with the full video. Hi there, Watery Dave Gardening. And I really was surprised that in a 10-gallon tote, I was worried about killing off all the worms. I thought the citrus would there would be no worms around it. It would kill things off and they'd move away to get away from it. They actually consumed all the lemons faster than I thought. And I dumped a bunch in, and I put in some stuff to buffer that acidity, the citric acid in it. There we go. That acidity in it, I put in the eggshells to do that, and it worked incredibly well. I was really surprised. So this thing that I kept hearing, don't put in, don't put in, don't put in, and it worked. I have been trying chicken bones, and actually the chicken bones that I've added, they've still had bits of meat on it with chicken. Now it's all cooked, it's not raw, but the worms actually ate off all the meat and off the bones. So there's a lot of stuff that they say not to put in that you can. The key is going to be moderation. And this is the big thing that people don't realize, is that you can't just, if I were to throw a ton of lemons in, and I mean like just load up the entire top of a bin with lemons, it'll probably kill the bin. There are some oils on there. There's some things that it takes longer to break down. It takes longer for those microbes to get to probably, and it would probably eventually hurt your bin. But this is kind of true with anything. If I were to take broccoli and just throw a ton of it in, the smell in my basement would be horrible. And I get that even with a little bit of broccoli sometimes, but also the worms would probably just shriek away in fear before they come back into it. So is there anything I say not to put in? I don't put in onions because they smell bad. Your entire thing of compost smells like onions. They break down, but I can't stand it. My entire basement smells like onions when I tried it. And I just don't do it. My parents, for their outdoor one, they put in onions, and they weren't putting in a lot. And every single teaspoon of compost out of their bin smelled like onions for a year. I don't throw in tomatoes because the seeds will actually grow after you're done composting them. So they won't grow in the bin, but then you'll put them in a garden. And I have flower pots that I put flowers in with compost, and I have tomato plants growing in them. So I don't throw tomatoes in anymore. Potatoes is another one that will grow. And I try not to throw in pumpkin seeds as much, although I typically just will let the seeds grow and then plow them under. So as far as what not to throw in really at all, do not throw in dairy. I would not throw in any dairy at all. And I would not put in any like real large quantities of meat. The bones maybe, but the meat I would not throw in. You're going to get some nasty stuff and smells with meats if you throw it in large quantities, unless you're doing like maybe a hot composting system. So let's just see what else we've got here. So hi Theo, these bits work okay. I've used them for a couple years. Anything that works as good as avocado in a worm bin. Oh, hi from Serbia. Wow. Okay, I'm glad to see. How's the weather up there? We've been talking about the weather a little bit because it's kind of cold here, but I like it, and some other people it's been nice. How is it in Serbia? Let me know in the comments here. All right. So anything that works better than avocado, works as good as avocado. Blended food I feel just works good in general for luring worms. I've tried multiple things. Blended banana probably works incredibly well, but watermelon actually is probably one of their favorite that you do not need to blend. If I throw a piece of watermelon on top of a bin, it will have worms just completely surrounding underneath it because of the water content and the sugars. They get lots of microbes because microbes love sugar, and that's what the worms are really eating. So watermelon or melons in general, like cantaloupe or honeydew, they work incredibly well for luring worms to a specific area. So to blend or not to blend? I've done video series on this. Blended stuff just disappears faster. I don't typically blend stuff up that much because it just takes a lot of time. I do have videos of my 3D printed shredder where I can run stuff through. I do have a food processor that I have for this, but I find that the batch system where you grind up a batch and you dump it out, and then you grind up another batch and you dump it out. That just takes too long for me, for the amount of food that I have. So I don't typically blend in that way anymore, although I think the food goes a lot faster. And when I say a lot faster, I'm not talking like, oh, a day or two. I mean like a week. Like if you have a month's worth of food, it'll go in a week to 2 weeks. So it goes a lot faster. But with the shredder that I have, that is a continuous feed, and I'll run it for 20 minutes straight, just feeding food into it. And then at that point, I'll have, let's say almost let's say 2 to 3 gallons worth of food. And that will also go incredibly fast when I add it to a system. So I do like blending or shredding stuff up into smaller pieces instead of throwing in whole bits. But it does take time to process, which I'm not happy doing. I don't like doing that all the time. And then the cleanup process also for the blending process, I have to clean the shredder out really well. Otherwise I'm going to get fruit flies like crazy. It's going to smell, it's going to rust, it's going to have issues because there's some metal pieces in there. Same with the blender or a food processor. You have to clean them. So I'm not as big on that. If I had a better grinding system, maybe it'd be a little better, but I still grind up a lot of stuff, but just not as much as I wish I could. So I think blending does work well. I just don't tend to do it all the time. So from Wooded Dave at Gardening, so you put a large onion in your worm bin and the worms actually went into the onion and ate it. They eat them. I'm not saying that they don't. They like onion. I just don't like the way it smells afterwards. I mean, having everything smell like onion in my basement, it smells like onion afterwards. And I don't mind the smell, but it just gets overpowering after a while. So and then Barry, you're saying potatoes are fine if frozen. Okay, I've never tried. I've been freezing them and throwing them in, but I don't throw them in very often. My parents actually had them growing. They threw potato bits in and they grew tons of potatoes to the point that they planted them in their garden, and they were shocked. They thought it was something else, and they grew all these potatoes and they were fantastic. And they didn't think potatoes from the store would actually grow more potatoes, but they were wrong. So that's actually a good, potatoes I think are a great thing to throw in. So any food with high moisture content that will attract the worms faster, as I said, watermelon is probably your best bet. Watermelon has it's like 98% water, and they love it. I've never seen, if I were to put a piece of watermelon face down in a bin, they will just converge on it like crazy. And I will have hopefully a time-lapse video of this later. I tried it out this summer, and my camera, I had massive issues with my cameras this year, and one of them actually died. So I hope to have a time-lapse video on actually a watermelon getting consumed by worms eventually. Yes, Barry, thank you. I know I've been trying to do these time-lapse videos. I will have more of them. I actually had to buy a new camera to do these. My old Canon 50D finally, after 250,000 actuations, died. And I tried it with a cell phone camera. It just didn't look good. And I had lots of issues with it. It kept going out. Even though it was plugged in, the power would flicker, and it didn't like that because it would all of a sudden start charging again. And it would pop up with an error, and it was too much of a work. So I actually lost my watermelon video that I was actually recording in that case. And then I also lost another one that I was trying with pumpkin. And now I'm trying a third video with pumpkin, and I ended up buying a new camera to do it. So thankfully, and by the way, guys, you watching these videos, this allows me to do stuff like this. So I actually bought a Canon 90D, which is a fairly expensive camera at $1,200 to do this. I already had the lenses and everything, but I basically just piled all the earnings that I made from last year right into making new videos. And that's really what I do with this. This is more for you and to keep me honest that I'm actually continue to doing this, because I have a tendency to start these projects and then just never finish them. So this has been going on for years now because of these videos and because of you guys out there. Everyone that's watching, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching these videos and keeping me honest. So let's just see here what else we've got here. Yes, and you're right. Freezing and thawing does work really well, but I still think blending works better because I have frozen and thawed food, and then I blended that same food, and the blended stuff still went faster in my videos, and that was tested. It went a lot faster, so it works. Now, non-frozen versus frozen food, the frozen stuff will be faster as well. So I could really show the difference if I wanted to with that too. Maybe that's something I should do a time lapse of. I should probably write that down. I'll have to watch this video later and get that. Make sure that I write that down in my my suggestion. Maybe thawed food versus or a frozen food that's thawed versus non-frozen food, and we'll see which one actually works better. So 5 degrees Celsius. Oh, okay. That's no snow. I know. I feel the same way. I love snow. But 5 degrees. So you're just above freezing there. Okay. So because we're right, I'm right around that freezing level right now. I thought it would have been colder, but so how much snow do you normally get up there in Serbia? Do you get feet, or is it something where you get just a small amount? I mean, we get anywhere between 0 inches a year to 5 feet. It seems to vary quite a bit here. Diatomaceous earth, is it okay to spread a layer on top of my worm bin? Have a massive fungus gnat infestation. I have tried it. I have not had great luck with diatomaceous earth. It's perfectly fine to spread on your bin. I mean, the stuff I bought is food grade. You could technically throw it on dog food and you can eat it yourself. I wouldn't, but you can. Be careful with the dust, though. You do want to wear masks when you're using this stuff. You don't want to just have it out there and be breathing it in. You can really hurt your lungs. And, it's something that I've talked about a lot of my videos. You really want to take care of your lungs, because this stuff, once it gets in there, it can really do damage and can cause massive issues, because I don't think it damages the lining in your lungs. I don't know if that ever really repairs itself. I would probably equate it to smoking, where you're damaging your lungs for like a decade, not just 6 months or something like that, but it's like a decade. That damage will stay there for a decade when you breathe this stuff in. And I didn't know this at first, so I probably have damaged my lungs a little bit, but I've gotten much better about wearing my masks when I use this stuff. But I have not had luck with diatomaceous earth. It gets rid of some of the infestation, but it needs to be dry to work. You can put it on wet, but it needs to be dry. So you really need to make sure that you leave the lid off and dry out your bin. So, oh, wow, from Hawaii. Really early morning there, I would think, in Hawaii. I don't know what the time difference is there. And yes, good morning, the one and only. And we have JK Composting Worms, as I said, from Hawaii. Robert, here's a question. I like to blend the food, then stuff it in the toilet paper and then freeze it. And that actually is a great idea. I did that once, and I really should do that again, because it's great to have those pre-made like food rolls, and the paper itself is going to guard the worms from the cold. Like if you don't thaw it out, you put it in frozen, it's going to guard the worms from hitting that frozen food right away. So you can just bury them all over your bin. And that's actually a great way to do it. And they worked really well. I haven't gone back to it, but I really should at some point, to feeding that way. So that's actually, Robert, I do have a video series on that, but that works incredibly well. You're right. Okay, how do I store the castings once harvested? Now, this is something I have made a video on, and I just have not posted it because I didn't like the way it looked. I'm going to make another one. I actually have really nice lights that my sister bought me for my birthday this year that I'm going to be able to use to make a better video on my system of storing. And it is basically a big 55-gallon tote that I put everything in. And this is part of the reason why I don't feel that the castings have to be perfect. And just so you know, you can never get all the worms out of your castings. I've tried my best, especially when I first started. And I'm sure everyone, when you first start, you try to get every worm, every cocoon, everything you can out of the castings. It is not possible. I have tried. I've spent hours sorting through worms to try to get there, and it's just not possible to do. So, but yeah, I store my castings essentially in a big 55-gallon tote, and I will have a video on that in the future. So Ahmed, I have a question about the nitrogen and carbon balance when feeding the worms. How do we adjust this? How much should the amount be? So you're asking for that in email, but I'll kind of answer now. And the answer is it really depends. You don't want it heating up. You don't want the hot composting balance. You really want a lot more carbon than you want nitrogen for a worm bin. You want carbon as their bedding, and then you add bits of food. You can overfeed, and then you'll get a hot composting, and that'll actually kill your worms. So you have to be careful about that. So I don't know what the exact ratio is, but it's probably a low nitrogen and really high carbon to make sure you maintain that balance where it's not going to start hot composting on you. A good idea to keep a paper and pen. I'm used to actually typing stuff up on my phone, but I don't want to do that while I'm live. But you're right. I should have a paper and pen down to comment and write some stuff down while I'm going through these. But I'll probably watch this one more time later to see how I did, since this is the first one I'm doing, to see if it's coming in clear, as I'm not sure if it is or not, and how I sound. I don't know if I need a microphone hooked up. I know I'm using my computer here, and I don't know how it's coming out very well, if it's coming out well or not as far as sound quality. I have predator mites in my bin. Do you recommend any bugs to add in a worm bin? Theo, I don't recommend adding bugs to a worm bin. As far as mites, I think diatomaceous earth is supposed to help get rid of them. Actually, diatomaceous earth is supposed to be abrasive and sort of break their shell and dry them out. I'm not exactly sure, but mites are supposed to be okay. Centipedes, I've heard, are bad. Centipedes are carnivorous, whereas mites tend to eat the material and actually are good. So let's see. It's basically microscopic sharded glass. Yes, I think that's what diatomaceous earth sort of is. It's microscopic fine dust particles that are really kind of like they're supposed to be sharp. So somebody Barry has not had success with DE as well. The worm environment is typically too damp. I have found I did it with my which I have right behind me here, the Verma bag, which is a little bit drier on top, and I really spread a lot, and it did cut down on the numbers, but it wasn't zero. I've tried some other things in there. It's really the number of fruit flies that were in there is a lot lower than it has been, but it's still not zero. So it's cut back, but it's not perfect. I'm trying to get down to something that'll actually work where you add it to your bin and then it's just zero without having toxic chemicals. Obviously, I'm not trying to add anything that I don't want to add to my gardens later. So, but it did work once I let it dry out. When it was wet, it didn't work really at all. You really need it to dry. You need to put it on really heavy from everything I've read. You need a ton of it, an absolute ton of it on there. And I did buy I think it's a 5-pound bag. And it's not expensive, but it's been hard to get it to work really well. But I'll keep trying it. So Cool Breeze, thank you for joining. I'm in the midst of harvesting a worm bin. That's always fun. I was debating on actually maybe doing a light harvest while talking, but I was like, for the first time, I'm just going to just sit here and talk, and everyone can just kind of sort of look at me. I know it's sort of boring to just look at me, but we'll try it that way this time. Maybe in the future, I'll actually do a light method harvest while I'm doing it, on one of my bins. I don't do those that often anymore since I have the sorting machine. But maybe I'll do that as well in the background at one point. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes for these live updates. So BTI mosquito bits, are they safe to spread in a worm bin? They are from what I read on the EPA website, they are used in organic gardening. So they should be safe. That means they're safe really for consumption technically. Now, I don't know if this brand is in particular. This does not mention anything about being organic. This does not mention anything about being safe. It says not to use it in potable water, or drinking water. So you're not supposed to drink this stuff. But this is essentially a bacteria that you put in your garden, and that actually works not in your garden. You're supposed to put this in not drinking water, in your stagnant water, prevent mosquitoes. And this bacteria feeds on the larva. So this is supposed to be safe. Eventually it probably dies out, and that's probably why it's safe to use. So 6:40 a.m. Wow, that's early. I guess I get up at 6:40 a.m. with the dog, but that's still early. Normally it's right around that time that I'm getting up. I'm not ready to jump online by any means. I'm still trying to get my coffee. So let's see. My worm bin is too big to blend or freeze and thaw. It's too busy. I can understand that. I mean, with how many I have here, I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bins going right now. It's way too hard for me to do that. I do throw everything in my freezer and freeze it. I don't thaw it out though. I just throw it in the bins. Frozen. I put some paper around it to protect the worms. And I just throw it in there. It's just too hard. I freeze everything to try to get rid of fruit flies and to start the breakdown process, but it's too hard to thaw it out, to take the time to do that, because then any fruit flies anywhere in my house are going to find that food and go to it, and then I'm going to be adding them to my bins. So I do freeze everything, but if I had more than this, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. And part of it is because I have a massive freezer that was in my old house when we bought it. They left their 1960s freezer there that still is in working condition, and we don't load it up. So I actually load it up with food on the bottom couple racks to fill up that space, because that makes it more efficient if it's full rather than empty. So I have blocks of frozen food in there essentially. So I do freeze almost, I want to say 90% of my food. The only thing I don't freeze, I think, are coffee grounds. So Lars, hi, you watched my videos for 1 year and decided to try it myself. I killed them all. It happens. I did that my first time, my first bin. And I did as much research as I could. This is before YouTube really had videos. And I did as much research as I could. And the first thing that happened, they all went out of the bin and went onto the floor and died. I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. I thought I had the perfect bin set up. I had cardboard shredded up in the bin. I had all sorts of stuff. I had the food ready to go. I let it sit for a week. I put soil in, and they all just left and died. And I still have no idea what it was. The next time I bought worms, I actually got them in a ton of compost that I added to my bins, and they stayed in that compost. They didn't eat any food for the first 4 months. They just stayed in the compost that was there, and eventually they multiplied. And those are the same worms I've had now for years. Part of it might be, and this is something that I know a lot of people have done, is that you have to check and see what kind of worms you got. A lot of people end up with different worms. The first worms I ended up with, I think, were not what I ordered. I ordered red worms, and I heard that shipper, I'm not going to mention names, sends out a lot of blue worms or jumpers, or the ones that tend to they evacuate a bin. You have to keep a light on them all the time. And I think that's what I had and why they died. But at the same time, I think a lot of people get them and then they get discouraged. Red wigglers, I leave bins open. They never leave it. They never leave the bin. I hardly find any on the floor dead. So they've worked pretty well. So let's see. Cool Breeze. I store castings in a sealable dog food bag. It holds about 50 pounds. Appreciate every single video. I'm so glad that it's helping you out. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being a part of this. I mean, I'm just trying to get people to feel confident to do this. And I make mistakes. I do. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a perfect person. I make tons of mistakes. I make mistakes with things that I know really well. I've made mistakes with things that, that I've done in my life that I should never have made, but I do it. Everyone does. So it's okay to make those mistakes. So, but a 50-gallon food, that might be a little bit too sealed. I actually, the bin that I have that I store my castings in does have some holes in the side from where it cracked open from use originally. So you might want to make sure it's not sealed fully. I don't know if that's a good thing to have that anaerobic conditions where if there's no oxygen, it might start, going foul. So you might want to just make sure there's some air in there, and also make sure there's a little bit of moisture. You want to keep it a little bit moist too, to keep the micropopulation, which is what you want to add to your gardens. So let's see here. Small container with food scraps and castings, and allows 6 weeks after harvesting. After this time, this allows for eggs to hatch. Yep. And migrate to the food, so you can extract. Yep, that's a good way to do it too. You put those to try to get those stragglers in. For me, I now throw it in the big bin, and later I'll be like, there's worms in there. It's a mixture of red worms and the European night crawlers, and I actually keep them in the finished compost to work through any material that might not be finished, and also continue to work through the material. But I try to sort them out to just keep them in my finished compost. I mean, it's just. I figure I'll just let them keep working through it, and they'll continue to work through it. And any new food particles they'll find and they'll work in there. So Cool Breeze. The only way I can get rid of all the mites is to dry the soil and don't feed till the bugs die off. And that typically does. I still had stuff survive though after drying it out and even letting the food go. It's just amazing how resilient they can be. And then adding diatomaceous earth. So maybe that's what I need to do, is really stop feeding at a huge layer of diatomaceous earth to really prevent it. And really one of the things I've noticed with a lot of my bins, when they dry out the side, so you have this side of the bin and the materials separate, and that's where it seems like a lot of the fruit flies are coming out from, is that side section that's open. And maybe I need to dump some of that diatomaceous earth around the edges into those bins, those edges, so that way they fill up. So in the one and only. So in what bucket do I store my castings? It's a 55-gallon Rubbermaid tote. I mean, it's just a massive tote. It actually has some holes on the sides, and there's some cracks in it from, I used to store all my camping gear until it actually expanded out and cracked the bin, and that's why I stopped using it for camping gear. So there's some actual holes around the bin and everything too, as far as that. But I don't really add any holes on purpose. And then for a while, the cracks hadn't deteriorated the bin enough where it was actually cracking apart. It was just like slight cracks. But it works really well for storing castings, I found so far. I will have a video on that in the future, though. Yeah, you definitely, as Whitey Dave Gardening, yes, they definitely need moisture and they need air for the castings, because that's worms need it, the microbes need it. Otherwise, you're going to get those anaerobic conditions. So, yeah. 60 bins, that is a lot. I'm guessing you're farming and you're selling them, or you're farming and you're using the castings in your yard. 60 bins, at that point, you would definitely need to have a better system than I have as far as maintaining, and also just to keep things going properly. So I'm nowhere near that as far as mine. 10 is more than enough for me. Although I have debated in the past about actually raising worms and selling them. I just didn't feel it was worth my time because of how much my time is worth with my job. I'd have to almost use up all of my time, my personal time, which I don't mind using some, but all of it would be a lot. And I do have a family with 2 kids, a dog, and a wife, and I don't really want to make it where it's like I never see them, which I've had happen in the past with my job, where I've just been working 80-hour weeks, and it's not something I want to go back to again. Although this is a lot more fun that I feel than my current job. So, but 60 bins, wow, yeah, you really have to have a good process for 60 bins. Thank you, Barry, for joining. And if you have any questions, just remember, ask away, and I will try to get back to it. We'll be doing more of these in the future, hopefully. So hopefully we'll continue doing this. And as I said, maybe on a monthly basis, maybe the first weekend of the month or something like that to start. And if we find that it's getting a lot of follow through, maybe we'll start upping it to a little bit more. So, and bye, Whitey Dave Gardening. Thank you for jumping on as well. And take care of those bins. So let me know when you get up to 100. I'm really curious to see. And what type of, next time you're on, if you had already jumped off, how many, what type of bins are you using? Are you using 10-gallon totes or really big bins? I'm curious on that as well. So my worms are fed finished compost. Actually, that's the best way to do it, really. Finished compost is a great food. And that's what I know Veteran Compost nearby does. And they sell all of that, I think, online on their website. So that is the best food you can give them. I've tried. I can't run a compost pile where I live. It's literally illegal to run a compost pile. So that's why I don't have one. That's actually why I picked up worm composting, is because I wanted to compost food scraps. So hi, Christine. Started an urban worm bag back in August with 1 pound of red wigglers. Is it time to harvest? How do I store the compost? So harvesting really depends on how much food you're adding, how much bedding, and how does it look in the bottom. If you're finding that the stuff at the top, if you just started it, by the way, when you harvest the first time on these urban worm bags, the bottom is still going to have paper in it. It's not going to be perfectly composted, which is fine. Now, if you're about, I want to say you should have at least a foot of depth. Okay, so it should be about a foot deep before you do your first harvest, at least, if not more. And really should be like around a foot from the top before you harvest, because it's all going to kind of collapse down in. Now, with the urban worm bag, you do have to be careful. The center can collapse, leaving the sides exposed. So before you kind of harvest, you want to push in those sides to really kind of get those lined up to go down the center. So that way the top section doesn't collapse down, which I've had happen before. But a month in, that seems a little bit soon. You might want to wait a month or two. And the first harvest, you're probably going to just take it and just dump it right back in the top, because it's not really fully composted. So I'd wait a little bit longer. Actually, I'm sorry. Oh, you said August. I'm seeing 1 pound. I'm thinking 1 month. Back in August, you probably can actually do a harvest then. It's probably time to do that harvest and then put it back in the top. You want to harvest it into a container. Make sure it's a nice big container that takes up the space underneath, because it can get a little messy, and you need to be able to spread it out so you can harvest more. As soon as you start seeing paper from the top or any food, stop harvesting, close it back up. Okay. So that's my hint. I've harvested these quite a few times. They work pretty well. If you have the version 2.0, which I'm sure you do if you bought it back in August, that has that section, which the drawstring, which really helps to make sure that you can actually open and close it easy. Make sure you close it up and really well when you do that, though, and that zipper's holding that closed. So yeah, you do have to balance family, work, and life. It's really important. He wasn't leaving, just saying bye to Barry. Okay, well, what kind of bins do you have, Whitey Dave? Do you have 10-gallon totes, or do you have big urban worm bags? Do you have custom-made containers, or do you have a Woodrow's, the system? So, Alvin, can I make red worms bigger for fishing? Yes, you can. It is not the best worm to use for fishing, I feel, but you can make them bigger, and the key is making your bed really muddy. You essentially want it like thick mud, and they will get really big because they absorb water. But also, I'm completely speculating on this, but I think pushing through that material when it's really thick and muddy makes it where they have to get more muscle. And because to push through it, they squinch up their bodies and then they push out. So what they'll do is they'll kind of go like this and they push out, and then they kind of go like they move. That's how they move along. And to do that, they have to have that muscle. And I think really wet castings will do that. I have a video actually the difference between a dry bin, which I ran really, really dry with just slight bit of moisture, and the worms were tiny. And then I had one where there was water in the bottom, essentially. The worms were incredibly healthy, but there was water in the bottom. And these were red wigglers, and they were big worms. They were big enough to fish with. But I think the European night crawlers do work a little better for fishing. So I'd highly recommend those over the red wigglers if you want to do fishing. They're just a bigger worm. They took a little longer to get the bin, I think, established because they didn't reproduce quite as quickly at the beginning, even though I ordered more worms. But they are just bigger in general. So I think they worked a lot better they would work a lot better for fishing, which I hopefully will try at some point with my kids. So thank you for that question. But it is something I know a lot of people want for their worms, is to go fishing with them. And for that, I really think the Europeans will work better, but you can have that wet bin, and that moisture will really help. So you use concrete trays for worms. 6 hours to maintain the 60 bins each week. Is that that's 6 hours a week? That's not too bad. I think for maintaining those. I know I spend probably a couple hours maintaining mine. Maybe an hour a week maintaining mine, especially with moving food around and everything. But also, I don't have a great system where I have some bins stacked and things like that, so I have to move them around a lot. And my basement area is a little small here. That's why I have the wall right behind me. I actually have the bins right behind. Actually, I should say I have these bins. Well, let me see. Actually, this side's better to see. This bin is right behind me, and then right behind that's the wall. And then essentially I have another 2 feet, and then I've got a table over there that's cabinets, and then I've got another wall. So I don't have a whole lot of space to work with. So it makes it a little harder. But so Christine, would it be bad to use the worm castings on indoor plants? Will it release critters into my house? If you have critters in your bin, it could release them in the house. However, I have added castings to my pots before. And in fact, I did a video on how I use them. A lot of times I'll replant things and I'll add castings in the bottom. I try to use clean castings. And what that means is I will actually let things sit in a container, and then I will try to sift through it a little bit more. So you might want to use something to kind of shake it out and get really, really fine castings. That way you don't get any of those bugs or anything, because they can survive in casting. So you maybe sift it through a strainer of some sort, like really fine sieve or something like that, to try to get rid of everything you can. Have a really, really nice, consistent, maybe something I'm trying to think like 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch, sieve or strainer. And that way you kind of eliminate those bugs, and that way you hopefully won't have those issues with bugs in them. But I do add it to mine. I haven't really had any issues with bugs. I typically will add soil on the bottom, castings in the middle, and soil on top, and sort of mix that in a little bit. I should say soil and castings in the middle section, and then soil on top, and that sort of makes a barrier. I don't just add it to the top, but you could instead also make a worm tea, and take your castings, soak them in a bucket. So you have a container, you soak them in there in like a mesh bag, like a tea. Actually, they could use they have tea bags you can buy that are they can soak them in, and then release some of those microbes into that water and then pour it in that way. And if we're doing that, they also recommend, I know I've heard people say you should use unsulfured molasses and things like that to really get that microbe population booming. And that's really going to help as well, because that's really what is going to help feed your plant, are those microbes, because they're going to break down the components in the soil to help feed your plant the nutrients that they need. So let's see. I fill the bins with compost all at once, and then all I have to do is turn the compost to aerate and water each week. Okay, yeah. So does turning work really well though? Are you turning your compost, not your worms? I'm guessing, because I wouldn't think that turning your worms over would help a lot. I noticed that the more I touch my worm bins, the slower they reproduce and the slower they work. But if I touch them less, they actually work pretty well. And some of them work incredibly well. I mean, there's some that I've left for 2 months without touching them, and it's only a 10-gallon tote, so it's not like it's loaded with food. And the material in it just turns fantastic. I mean, it's all worked through really well. I mean, it's really, really looks like just beautiful brown castings, or black gold even, depending on the material I fed. And I will say, my castings, they are more brown typically because of the fact I use a lot of cardboard. If I use more, if I've actually used leaf compost at one point that I bought, and that actually was more black. And then also if I add a lot of coffee grounds, it'll turn black. But typically my castings are more of a brownish in color. So I'm gonna start getting ready to log off here, guys. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, please thank you for watching my videos. If you have questions, always leave comments. I will try to get back to you. If you don't see me answer within like a couple weeks, maybe try writing again as a fresh comment, and I will try to get back. Yes, thank you again, Cool Breeze, for joining. Thank you, everyone. Actually 20 participants online with the short notice on this. I want to say I'm surprised so many people jumped on. And thank you for all the great questions. I probably will do this again. Hopefully, maybe within another month, we'll try this again. So thank you so much, everyone. And hopefully you guys have a good weekend. Thank you.